Good morning, Pelham Road. Boy, I look the fright here. I just wearing that hat. So, well, good morning, Pelham Road. Hope you're having a good day. If not, let's make it better from here on out. All right. Stop that. Turn that frown upside down. I tell you what, we got some really good pictures at Instagram. Sam took the kids off on a little adventure last weekend. And you can go over to Instagram and see pictures of the kids when they went to their little one-day camp retreat, riding horses and doing a variety of things. You can catch up on all things Pelham Road over at the YouTube station. All right. Now, one piece of programming news. We're doing a lot of rethinking of all of our social media and all of the things that we put out. And I think that those of you who are listening to this know that we put out, for our size church, we put out a lot of social media. And so I'm announcing today that at the end of October, these Good Morning Pelham Roads will end, okay? There will be some new programming that will be birthed probably, but as of yet, we don't know exactly what that's going to be. But we do know that we're going to kind of pull the plug on this by the end of October, okay? Which gives us a chance to have our favorite Halloween candy contest and our favorite Halloween music. I feel the Monster Mash coming on, really. And maybe even Halloween movies that we like. All right? So, for our devotion today. Back in June, I did a few devotions focusing on really what's going on behind the text, behind the words. It's a type of study of Scripture that I love. I don't know that many other people like it as much as I do. But I did have some of you give me some feedback that you wanted to do it again, and I meant to get around to it before now, but, turning the calendar in October made me think, well, I really need to get back to this. So we're going to begin with this sermon that Jesus preaches in Nazareth, all right? It's his very first sermon. And it's a little perplexing to us who loiter in the Bible all the time that this story is only shared once. You would have thought, since it's his first sermon, that you would have had all the major networks cover it, but only WLUKE covered it. And so this is Luke's rendition of this first sermon from Nazareth. When Jesus came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him, and he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it is written. So just the first note, they handed him a scroll, but he finds this place. This is what he wanted to read. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release of the captives, recovery of the sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. He rolled the scroll back up, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all the synagogue were fixed on him, and then he began to say to them, now bear in mind he's sitting down now, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. And all of them spoke well of him. They were amazed at his gracious words. And they said, is this not Joseph's son? And he said to them, doubtless you will quote to me this proverb one day, doctor, cure yourself. And you will also say, do here in your hometown the things that we hear you do over at Capernaum. And Jesus said, truly I am telling you, no prophet, he's lining himself up with the prophets now, is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, one of the prophets, when the heaven was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine all over the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them, none of the Israelites, but to a widow at Sidon. And there were also many lepers in Israel at the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed, but Naaman the Syrian was. And when they heard this, when the people heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage. And that's what you need to begin to think about. What did he just say that angered them? They got up and they drove him out of town and led him to the brow of a hill so that they might hurl him off. But he passed through them and went on his way. Jesus was an observant Jew. And while this was his first sermon, it was not his first time to hear Scripture. It was not his first time to be in synagogue. And as this story sort of reveals, whoever had been teaching Jewish history to Jesus had done an excellent job. And that somebody may have been sitting in the synagogue themselves that day. Certainly in that synagogue that day were friends of his mother's, and there were also maybe even kids that he had grown up with who were now young adults. He was no stranger to them. This was Jesus, Joseph and Mary's son. You know, the one that grew up down here, across from Levi, where the road gets real narrow. Now, when the announcements and the music was finished, a scroll was given to Jesus. And a scroll has very few divisions. It's mostly wall-to-wall words. It has a little thin line or a thin margin around the edges where it might be clean, but otherwise it is wall-to-wall words. And Jesus found the place that he wanted to read from. This is his selection. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. Now consider the classes he speaks of here. The poor. Release of captives. Recovery of sight to blind. And let the oppressed go free. And to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Now, it's not a perfect rendering of Isaiah 61, but that's what he's reading from. The poor, the captive, the blind, the oppressed. This is who Jesus is going to fight for. This is who he is working for. So, he's making an announcement to this congregation. If you're waging war on the poor, if you're standing in God's way of taking care of the poor, if you're forcing the captives into debt, and they're in debt to you, and that's why they're captive, if you're holding people down, Jesus is announcing, God is against it, and now I'm against it. It is often said that Jesus' followers were poor. That's certainly part of the company of people who followed him. But many of the people that followed Jesus were the ones who were just yearning to be free, as the inscription on the Statue of Liberty says. They may not have been poor at all, but they were people who faced an uphill battle against all the insiders. Everybody else had an advantage, and they had no advantage, and they were working really, really hard. And don't miss this last sentence. To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. That's called the year of Jubilee. This is outlined in the book of Leviticus. Jesus is saying the Jubilee year is here. You know what the Jubilee is? It's when slaves and prisoners go free. It's when debts are canceled. Land that was sold under pressure would be returned to the original owners. Every 50 years, that's what the Jubilee was, there was a divine rebalancing of the economy. And the synagogue goers would have heard this clearly. But that doesn't upset them at all. That's not the part that gets them upset. Their reaction to that was they were amazed at his words. Well, that's enough for today. We'll pick up here tomorrow and talk about their reaction to the even stronger words that Jesus is about to deliver.